Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Source Comic Boom collaborations. Your DC Spotlight for September 5th, 2023. Apologies, everybody. I wasn't here last week. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about not being here last week. Good thing, bad thing. Rocky was on quite a tear on some of these books. I didn't see them the way that he saw them. In fact, we just spent the last 45 minutes debating before we even started recording about some of the points that were made. I don't disagree that Night Terrors just wasn't that great. It wasn't that original of an event. Wasn't that exciting of an event. Some wasted potential there with the Sleepless Night. Such a fantastic name and concept. I sort of feel like Williamson trying to do what Scott Snyder did with the Dark Knights and Dark Knight's Death Metal, mashing up Batman and Aquaman, Batman and Doomsday, Batman, Wonder Woman, what have you. But the Sleepless Nights, we just didn't get enough of them on the page to really make them exciting. And then as far as the story goes, some different plot stuff. I think the Nightmare Stone itself really was the one pulling the strings. Insomnia, definitely worthy of being a big bad, but even he was hoodwinked by the Nightmare Stone. And then I didn't think the art was that great. But I did feel like Williamson did a good job of wrapping everything up. It did make sense, to me anyway. I know Rocky was having a hard time with some of the plot points, didn't think they made sense. It made sense to me, but maybe I'm just reading too much into it. I'm putting lipstick on the pig with, Dead Man. Dead Man never had a family, so if Insomnia is going to create a family for him, why wouldn't he make him look like Dead Man's family? Although I admit it was kind of silly. The Nightmare Stone itself, I think, was the one that created the family for Insomnia, so that's why they ate them. I don't think that was Dead Man that did it. But anyway, I'm glad it's over, but I think it did wrap up satisfactorily, and it did make sense to me, but again, maybe I'm just making it make sense in my head because I don't want it to not make sense.
I feel compelled to say that, prior to us doing this podcast and live stream, Jace regaled me with his opinion, and he very ferociously disagreed with me on some points. I kind of regret that he couldn't re-express himself because it got quite heated, and it is regretful that we never got able to we weren't able to rant. The last time we ranted like that, I think it was over Tim Drake's Robin. But you did make some salient points, which I know that you're going to bring up again, and we'll talk about it again when we review Batman 137. So
we'll kick off with Batman 137 because while we didn't necessarily agree, or I didn't necessarily agree with some of the things Rocky said on Night Terrors, I sort of thought it was more just the way what I took from the story as opposed to what Rocky took from the story. When it comes to Gotham War, it's a little bit more of a fundamental disagreement here, right? And I think that's sort of the point, which is what makes it so interesting to me, because I think you even have members of the Bat family that are saying, hold on a second. Now, in the review last week, Rocky kept saying the members of the Bat family, everybody except for Bruce and Damian agreed with Catwoman. And I went back and reread this thing 3 times, and at no point does somebody say, yes, I agree. Other than Jason Todd, at no point did they say, yes, I agree with you, Selena. What they say is we need more data, or maybe she has a point. We need to look at this. Violent crime is down 75%, which, in two months, that does seem, a little far-fetched. But again, I'm only going, this is one of the things Rocky and I kept going back and forth on. I'm only going by what is being presented in the book, right? Rocky makes the point that, okay, Bruce is gone for 8 weeks. You're telling me that violent crime goes down and these other members of the Bat family aren't trying to figure out why? They're not aware of what Selina's up to? Aren't they supposed to be detectives? Are trained by Bruce? They should have been able to figure it out. My point being, well, in a way, so they're supposed to be hands off, right? Of Catwoman. I don't want to go after Catwoman unless I have to, unless she's doing something terrible, and threatening people. But I'm going to take a little bit more of a hands-off approach to Selina because that's Bruce's woman in a way, right? So that's sort of how I take it. And in that meeting, when she presents everything, the first thing Nightwing says is, hold on, you're just shifting crime from one thing to another. This isn't a solution. So it seems they're conflicted, right? they themselves are conflicted. I'm conflicted. I don't want there to be crime, but if I have to choose between a crime where somebody's killed and a crime where somebody's jewels are stolen and they can make an insurance claim, it's sort of a no-brainer, right? And that's Selina's point. But wrong is still wrong, and it's sort of interesting. One of the things that Rocky and I didn't talk at all about before we started was Bruce Wayne himself and Selina's point of he's still that little boy in the alley. He can't get past it. He sees, actually, it might be Jason Todd that makes the point in this issue. Bruce sees things black and white. He's still that 10-year-old little boy. It is interesting that they chose to put Bruce to sleep for 8 weeks. All the trauma he's been through, his hand missing, it's giving him a perspective. He's not flexible, and he's seeing, all this crime happen, and all he cares about, it doesn't matter what kind of crime, I'm going to put a stop to it. No crime is good. And Selina's saying, there's not people being mugged in the alley the way your parents were. If we can stop violent crime by allowing these thieves or these criminals to become thieves and sort of a victimless crime, if you will, because again, they're going to be made whole by the insurance, but then it affects everybody, right? Then everybody's insurance rates go up. It's sort of that idea that there is no such thing as a victimless crime. So it is a very interesting story and an interesting debate morally that Zdarsky and Tini Howard have created here. But on the background of Batman really flying off Batman's losing it, like, for lack of a better term. Batman is losing it. He's reacting, and it's interesting, right? Like, he doesn't want there to be violence either, but yet it kind of goes back to what Peacemaker, right? Like, I love peace so much, I'm willing to do anything for it, including violent things that are antithetical to peace. Batman is so focused on stopping crime that he's willing to commit technically crimes himself, right? You think about that, it's always there. That dichotomy is always there. Batman wants to stop crime so much he's willing to assault people, beat people up, put them in the hospital, destroy public property, do all these sorts of things that are technically crimes themselves in order to stop crime. It makes him seem a little bit more, I don't know, kind of out on the edge when he's the one who's perpetrating violence for crimes that aren't violent. So again, it's a real moral dilemma, and I don't think there is an easy answer, which is sort of the point of it, right? Yes, all crime is bad. These criminals should not be stealing from anybody. But again, it's interesting because Batman won't even, in a way, I feel like Zdarsky had to put Batman in the place he's in, where he's sort of not. I don't think he's thinking clearly. He's not being logical about this. If he was because logically, if violent crime is down, okay, that's a good thing. I want to keep violent crime down. I want to keep it at its current low rate. Now, how do we add in stopping the nonviolent crime, right? So if all these criminals are being trained by Selina to go in and do high-rise burglaries and crimes where they're actually not confronting anybody and they're just going in and stealing whatever. I think it was Tim Drake that said in Battle Lines, hey, maybe if we could go see the training, why can't you have the training these criminals have used that they've gotten from Selina? Why can't they use their training to go stop other criminals in other cities? And you pay them for that, right? Isn't that what Batman Incorporated is in a lot of ways? There's other ways to solve this other than Batman just flying off the handle, going, no, Selina, this is a terrible idea, and resorting to violence, right? Resorting to the very thing that Selina is trying to stop. So I don't know. To me, it makes sense. I know Rocky's going to talk about the Bat family attacking Batman himself, so I'll save my thoughts on that as kind of a rebuttal. But this is a really interesting story to me because it is possible for two people to have an argument and for neither one of them to be correct. I don't think Selina's correct in what she's doing in saying, okay, let's stop violent crime by turning all the criminals into nonviolent criminals. Yes, it's great you're stopping nonviolent crime, but you're still, first of all, you're training them, and if they go back, now they're better trained. that was Damien's point. Damien has a good point. That's not good because it's still crime. Two wrongs don't make a right. But the way Batman's handling it and flying off the handle and being violent, really violent, actually, and I think it's in the next issue, which I've already read of, which I think is the Catwoman issue, very violent against Jason Todd to the point that he could have really injured him. That's not the way to go either. I think they're both wrong. I don't agree with either one. Really interesting moral debate. What are your thoughts on this second issue, Rocky? Did it change at all what you thought about the first issue? Maybe our conversation changed things.
Well, actually, I will give you some credit because one of the benefits of when we both do this together, which we couldn't last week, is that if I do get a little hot-headed, you're always there to be a sober second thought for me, and I definitely ranted last week. One of the things that I'm going to specifically mention this is that you and I had a debate about, and I gotta, you could be correct on this, and that is that I was operating. I got the impression in the battle lines drawn that the Bat family was aware that's what Selina was doing, and when Selina called that meeting, she used the phrase "call another." She tells Marquise, "Call another meeting." So I assume that she had already had a meeting with the Bat family, that they knew what was going on. I assume that Oracle had attempted to tell Batman, but in fact, she did not. I assume that because then that Batman met Tim Drake, and Tim Drake told him Selina's having a meeting, called a meeting, had masks off. And I just assumed that 8 weeks had passed, that the only person that needed to catch up on what was going on was Batman, because he was the guy that was asleep in a coma for 8 weeks. And I will grant you that if Selina managed to drop the crime rate by 75% and the Bat family wasn't aware until that meeting that really Selina was the mastermind behind all that, okay, I get into it a little bit more. I'm not gonna, and I'll just leave it at that. I'll leave it at that. I do think overall it lacks some verisimilitude for me, given how I perceive Gotham City and the crime rate. I just can't imagine all these petty criminals suddenly deciding to voluntarily walk into a warehouse and get training, and all suddenly they're going to decide to just rob certain high rises and what have you. But we'll get into that later. But
yeah, I will say that if it had gone the way you're thinking, and before Selina undertook this undertaking, she met with all the members of the Bat family other than Batman and said, "Hey, this is what I'm going to do." And then they all just let her do it. Yeah, that's bullshit. And that is tacitly agreeing with her. Yeah. So if that's what you thought, then I get what you were saying about them agreeing with her. But I don't think that that's what happened. Yeah.
Well, fair enough. Yeah. And I guess we'll just leave it at that. Now, having said that, for this particular issue, wow, things continue to escalate. Batman, I will say that Batman did have some second thought. He did question himself, even in battle lines, that, well, maybe Selina has a point. But Batman is struggling with the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh, is still ever on his mind. He's basically tried to cage the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh out, but Batman of Zur-En-Arrh does still occupy that portion of his psyche that has an influence on him. It is always more aggressive. Very clearly, Tim Drake and the Bat family, this issue starts off, they're concerned about Batman because after Failsafe, Red Mask, Insomnia, there's a lot that's been going on. But the reality is that it's not surprising that Batman is not going to tolerate any crime. Not at all. And I guess in the spirit of Civil War, of Captain America v. Iron Man, I'm definitely on the side of Damien. And in fact, as I said last week, and I stand by it, I never thought a day would come when I would 100% side with Damian Wayne over every other member of the Bat family. But alas, that day has come. And that's fun. The bottom line is, I can understand the philosophy of, well, if this many people's lives are being saved because you have a benevolent dictator, benevolent mobster, Catwoman, who's controlling crime, that is a legitimate argument to be made that, well, we have a benevolent mobster, we have a godmother there, a new one, the way she's doing it, it's all well and good. but it's very difficult to reconcile that type of, Batman. That's usually a role that the Penguin makes. And so it's really difficult to imagine. I don't know what's Catwoman's end game here is with this. She wants to, even in this issue, she talks about controlling Batman, keeping him at bay, using Jason Todd to keep him at bay, sort of keep him away, keep him out of our way while we do what we have to do, while we engage in crime. That just seems wrong to me, that the Bat family, like, I'm not sure what their end game is. Are they hoping to even if they could reason with Batman, and this is what I'm struggling with, Jace. Even if Batman got rid of the Batman or Zero-Nine in his psyche, I can't imagine even a calm, rational, calm Batman, if ever there was one. I can't imagine him ever siding with Selina's approach here to basically allow the type of criminal activity, even some criminal activity to this extent. And what happens in this issue is I just feel like the entire Bat family, even Oracle, she doesn't want to start a war, but she doesn't want. She feels that they're all so worried about Batman, that Batman's got out of control, that Batman's angry, that Batman's going to do something terrible, and really, what does Batman do? Like when Batman at the beginning here, Batman stops a couple of Selina's former prison mate friends from robbing a penthouse. And I think we're supposed to get the impression that Batman's really mean and cruel, and he's causing them pain and he's hurting them. And I look at that and I see, good, it's Batman kicking ass. Now, I guess you could say, is he using excessive force? Okay, he's using, but isn't that like what Batman does? But I'm not buying into this narrative that it's clear that Zdarsky and Howard want us to buy into this narrative that Batman's going crazy and Batman's art. Meanwhile, we're supposed to side with a mobster. I have a real hard time with that. Now, I think that's the point of the story, and I think that's what your point is. That's the gist of the story. This is meant to arouse the emotions of the reader, saying, because we're picking a side. On the one hand, Batman's right. On the other hand, well, you can kind of have Selina's point, but I really struggle with it. And at the end of the day, I think that once they get Batman out of his, if they could get Batman, if all the members of the Bat family could just maybe calm down and have a conversation. But as you and I were talking prior to the podcast here, just when any member of the Bat family, just when Batman is about to have a discussion, whether it's with Tim Drake or Nightwing or Oracle, they're always interrupted. They're always fighting. So there doesn't seem to be a moment's peace where they can just stop and have that type of conversation. And that, while I can understand that, that's also why I find it lacks a degree of verisimilitude, because I don't see the Bat family as letting, I can't see them letting it get this far out of hand. And I'm not sure. I love the ending to this issue. I love who shows up. And it's Vandal Savage, and he's supposed to show up pursuant to Detective Comics. He's in Ram V's Detective Comics as well. So I'm wondering if there's a link to Ram V's to the Orgam family. Vandal Savage ends up Oracle sells. I mean, what Oracle does here, I believe it's Oracle that allows the Bruce Wayne Manor to be sold. Oracle manipulates Batman. They're all basically trying to take down Batman here, the entire Bat family. I don't find there was enough justification here for the Bat family to do that. I'm just stunned that they feel that Batman, who's done nothing wrong in this issue, he's stopped crime. And by the way, he's the only one that stopped crime, I think, in this issue. And he's being taken down by the Bat family. If this was in any other metric, why doesn't Batman call the Justice League and say the Bat family's gone rogue? Would Superman side with the Bat family? I don't know. Would Wonder Woman? Would Flash? Would Green Lantern? I don't know. Something to ponder here. I don't know, because Batman, he's rational in one moment, and then he seems to be having Batman of Zero-Na in his mind the next. So I'm not, you know, I'm more conflicted now because of my conversation with you. But I still, God bless Damian Wayne. So what are your thoughts on this issue?
Yeah, so again, I go to the fact that I don't agree. You know, you mentioned you're supposed to choose sides. I'm on neither side. Batman is wrong, and Selina is wrong. They're both wrong. I'm not on either side. It's kind of frustrating, but I agree with you. Yeah, it lacks a little bit of ring of truth here that somebody as smart as Batman wouldn't take a step back and say, "Hold on a second, let's think about this logically." Like, I just want some cooler heads to prevail, and that's not going to happen. And, you know, you would think that it is Batman. Cooler heads should prevail. He's the thinking man's hero. But again, I go back to this is why Zdarsky put him through everything he's put him through over the past year, so that we could maybe understand why he's not taking the time to think about it. Like, when he stops he stops those criminals. Yes, it looks like he uses excessive force. You can make the argument, well, if those guys hadn't been breaking the law, they never would have been in that position. I don't necessarily ascribe to that. I think Batman could have, especially because it's Batman, and, you know, they look like a couple out-of-shape criminals here that are trying to rob this penthouse. He could have stopped them easier and not hurt them so badly. But whatever, we'll set that aside. But later, when Batman takes out this criminal named Jimmy Milford, who used to work for Mr. Freeze, and then Tim confronts him, he says, "Well, you're hitting it pretty hard, right? That's 8 of Catwoman's people you've rounded up. You know, you just got through with Failsafe and Red Mask and Insomnia. You know, maybe you should take it a little easy." And I think Tim's trying to reach him and say, "Hey, let's stop and have this conversation," right? There's nobody interrupting here, but Batman doesn't want to hear it. And what I really find interesting, at no point has Tim said he agrees with Selina or they shouldn't be arresting these criminals. Batman says to Tim, and again, this to me shows how far off the reservation Batman is. He's not thinking clearly. He says, okay, Tim makes the point that assault and murder rates are down. Again, violent crime is down. And Batman says, we do our best to save everyone. I've radioed the police to pick these people up. If I find out you help them get away, I'll arrest you myself. What has Tim done that you would think that Tim Drake is now going to break the law and help these two and help this guy Jimmy Milford get away? Like, that doesn't make any sense at all for Batman to say that. Like, Tim's not going to let this guy get away. The guy did break the law. I think what the rest of the Bat family is saying is, yes, violent crime is down 75%. We should still be focusing on that 25%, but we also should be talking to Selina to find a way. A lot of the Bat family themselves, they seem, other than Jason Todd and Damian Wayne, Damian who's completely on Bruce's side, Jason Todd who's completely on Selina, everybody else feels sort of frozen, right? They're like, we don't know what to do. You made the point, Stephanie Brown, she says in this issue, she saw one of Catwoman's guys sneaking into a house. She didn't do anything to stop him. That felt weird. I don't know why. He's still breaking the law. Stephanie, why didn't you stop him? Right? Just because you want to stop violent crime as opposed to nonviolent crime, it doesn't mean when you see a nonviolent crime, you just let it happen. So yeah, they seem to be sort of in this weird place. And one thing you didn't mention, and you did mention what's Selina's end game here. That's the part that I really want to talk about as well, because 8 weeks is, in a way, it's a long time. In a way, it's no time at all, right? When you talk about societal behavior, long enough to see a pattern, but not long enough to say that pattern's going to stick. So what is Selina's end game? We see a lot of the villains, the supervillains of Gotham, all get together, right? Professor Pig, Scarecrow, Killer Moth, Black Mask is there, Two-Face, the Ventriloquist, Mr. Zaz, Mad Hatter. They're like, okay, we haven't been able to really accomplish the things we want to accomplish, without henchmen. You made the point last time that really these guys can't do things without henchmen. Well, they can. They're probably not as efficient. Can't do as much. Easier with henchmen. But regardless of that, they're not just going to sit back forever. 8 weeks is not that long. So again, I don't think this pattern of nonviolent crime down 75% lasts. It just changes, right? Gotham City evolves. These villains evolve. and start doing things on their own, or come up with other ways to do them, a violent crime will eventually swing back the other way. So Selina's solution, in my mind, is not going to work long term. So that's the other part of it. But to your point about the members of the Bat family taking on Batman, like physically attacking Batman, you do notice that they don't physically attack Batman until he and Red Hood are physically attacking each other, fighting each other, right? And they say, Batman, you need to take a step back. I don't take that as the Bat family saying, hey, we agree with Selina, Batman. You came into Selina's warehouse where she's training everybody and basically kicked everyone's ass and destroyed this headquarters, destroyed this home base. Selina's not going to be able to operate out of here. I don't think they go in there and try to stop Batman because of that. I think they're trying to save Bruce from himself in a lot of ways, because they're afraid he's going to go too far with Jason because Jason agrees with Selina, and he's going to do something he'll regret with Jason. That's how I took it. I didn't take it as, hey, Batman's decided he's going to stop Selina from doing this, having this program with criminals in any way that he can, and they're fighting for the side of Selina. I think they're just trying to stop Bruce and Jason Todd from fighting. And again, they want to take a step back and say, hey, we need to think about the best way to handle this. But again, I could be wrong. I do agree with you. Having Vandal Savage show up at the end is pretty cool. He bought Bruce's manor. He bought Wayne Manor. We'll see some fallout of that and the way it affects Bruce in the next part, in part 3. Which is pretty interesting, and again illustrates a little bit of how Bruce might be sort of losing things. But it's interesting, right? Like he's flying off the handle. He's so focused, partly because of his personal feelings for Selina, I think, with stopping her program, stopping these criminals or whatever, to the point where he's neglecting things that he shouldn't be neglecting. Like, how could you let somebody else buy Wayne Manor? Why are you even still in the brownstone? Doesn't he have his money back by now? Like, what the hell's going on? You're losing it, Batman. You're losing it. You're wrong in the way you're handling this situation. Selina's wrong for creating this situation. And I sort of feel like a lot of the rest of the Bat family feels sort of caught in the middle. They're both wrong in my mind. I'm not on Team Selina, and I'm not on Team Bruce. Yeah. And I'm definitely not on Team Damian. Never will be. I don't care. I would, if Damian said grass was green, I would disagree. No.
Look, let's be clear here. No one's in favor of a genuinely psychotic Batman, I guess. But if it's so far, I mean, at the end of the day, Batman stops crime. He stops all crime, and I'm on the side of stopping all crime, not cherry pick crime. And a godmother gets to decide what is and what isn't.
Yeah, but if you're confronted.
I understand, and one of the points you made earlier, I don't know if you made it on the podcast here, but you made it before, and it was a good one. You made a point that, well, the Bat family doesn't want to take, even if the Bat family was against Catwoman, they wouldn't want to make a move against Catwoman because they'd want Batman to know what they're doing before they take any move against his lover / almost bride to be, whatever. So I understand that I get, but I still maintain that this ought not be made out to be this difficult decision for this Bat family to make in this particular scenario. I just don't quite see it that way. And in fairness, I will say that, by the way you're describing this, Jace, would have worked better if I think Teenie Howard would have done a better job in the pages of Catwoman getting to this point. I don't think it was particularly clear. I don't think it was, this was not, I mean, going into Gotham War here, I don't think this was adequate setup for it. And I'm actually more interested in what the Penguin's up to. I want the Penguin to come back because I just want to make a point that, remember the Penguin One Bad Day series? That Penguin, written by John Ridley wrote it. The Penguin in One Bad Day sounded an awful lot like of what Catwoman is now. How the Penguin, Gotham needs the Penguin to keep the petty thieves at bay, to keep all the crime in control. That's how Batman let Penguin get away with all that stuff in Penguin One Bad Day. And here I find similarities here that Catwoman, in many ways, better the devil you know, Batman, than the devil you don't. So I like the idea. The concept's interesting that, well, you know what? If we can keep the crime rate down, why not have a godmother that I can sleep with and have sex with whenever I want and have some control over her, as if you control Selena, as opposed to dealing with Two-Face or Joker or Penguin. So I get it. I get it in that respect. I just can't see Batman, at least how I've always seen Batman, buying into any of this. But I'm really curious to see how this ends. I really am, with Vandal Savage on the scene. There's going to be more players on the scene. As you said, you've read ahead as well. This is going to get much more interesting. I'll say this to viewers, much more interesting before it ends. And so it's a hell of a lot better already than how I found Night Terrors. So,
yeah, I mean, when you look at it, we're really talking about a society, right? Like, is it possible to have zero crime? I don't think it's possible. So if you have to have some crime, if there's two crimes occurring, one is violent, people are going to die, and one is somebody stealing jewels out of a safe, which one do you want the Bat family to stop? I mean, it seems a no-brainer, right? Like, life is precious, can't be restored. Jewels can be replaced. Jewels can be, you get paid off by your insurance company. That's not the case with, somebody's life. So there's more value there. So again, Selena has not thought this through. It's not really going to work to long-term lower violent crime. It'll just end up shifting in my mind. But it is an interesting moral debate. But again, I think they're both wrong, because I don't think what Selena's doing will work long-term. The way Batman's handling it is not right either, because what he should be doing is what Tim wants to do, right? Like, hey, let's go look at the training. Let's go find out what's working. Let's go talk to these criminals. I mean, for lack of a better term, town hall meeting there at Catwoman's headquarters and go, why are you you talk to the criminals. Why did you decide to take this life of crime? Why did you decide to go work for Two-Face, Mr. Freeze, Penguin, whomever, and commit these violent crimes? And why are you now willing to be trained by Catwoman to undertake non-violent crimes? You've taken, a step in the right direction. How do we help you take the next step to where you're not going to be committing crime at all? That, to me, that would be a more worthwhile endeavor for Batman to be spending his time than going out and trying to stop these criminals that have better training now. But yeah. I don't know. I guess that doesn't make for a very exciting comic. Just have a town hall meeting with Batman talking to criminals. So, all right, let's move on. Rocky and I have talked about this for like 2 hours now. So we'll pivot over to Fire and Ice. Welcome to Smallville, written by Joanne Starter, Natasha Bustos on art, Tamara Bonville on colors, Ariana Mayer on letters. I like what's being done here. First of all, the covers are absolutely spectacular. Especially, and I think I mentioned this before, we may even have shown it. I can't remember if we did or not, but there's unfortunately, it's a 1-in-25 Kevin Maguire cardstock cover where it's just Fire and Ice with the old school Justice League International logo or Justice League logo. And they're looking, kind of looking up at the camera, and it's just Fire and Ice. And they're looking around going, is it just us? Like, where's everybody else? That, very famous cover. It's been homaged a ton of times. The normal covers, Terry Dodson with Fire and Ice looking beautiful. Dodson draws very beautiful women. David Nakayama has the B cover, a little more dynamic, but also very beautiful. And then, of course, you have a Jen Bartel cover where the fashion is at its forefront. And Amanda Conner does a 1-in-50. So, yeah, you can't go wrong no matter which cover you pick. So we know Fire and Ice. I hope you guys all had a chance to listen to my interview with Joanne Starr from San Diego Comic-Con. But we know Fire and Ice were, for lack of a better term, banished to Smallville by Superman because of the fight they had in Baltimore, where they were fighting Guy Gardner, or Fire at least was fighting Guy Gardner as much as they were fighting, I think it was Titano. So Superman has sent them there to hopefully kind of learn a lesson and sort of be reminded why they do what they do. Ma Kent is in this issue as well. She comes across as she has a lot of agency in here, which I like. So there's not any place for them to stay, which I find a little ridiculous that there'd be no place for them to rent other than an old salon that got closed down. So they're going to be running this beauty salon. One of the girls, 19-year-old girl that used to run the beauty salon, is going to be working for them. They've got Elron, which is a Kryptonian robot, as kind of an assistant that Superman sent to sort of babysit, I think, in a lot of ways, because when Fire, in hopes of kind of proving herself in the eyes of the world again, sort of issues in a challenge to whatever supervillain wants to come and fight, King Shark, of all people, shows up. And then before Fire can even take out King Shark, Superman shows up, takes him out in no time. So I have a feeling Elron is, even though he's pretending to be on the side, and he even calls Fire like his Emerald Empress at one point, or Your Majesty, or what have you. And she's, I like that. I think Elron is sort of he's a little mole. He's going to tell Superman what's going on. I can't explain it why else Superman would show up when King Shark shows up. But there's a little bit of a falling out between Fire and Ice. They've always been really good friends. Fire does not want to be in Smallville. Ice is trying to make the best out of it, and really, take advantage and kind of do what Superman says. Whereas Fire, she's sort of being the rebellious teenager and sort of pushing back against it. And after Superman shows up and prevents her, in her mind, in Fire's mind, from stopping King Shark and sort of saving face, she calls somebody to come and she's like, hey, I need you to come to Smallville. I need you to let me basically kick your ass so that I look better, on social media and what have you. So there's a lot of, and I'll let Rocky say who it is. And I imagine, I'll just say the character that it is, the hijinks will ensue 100%. But a little bit meta, a lot of social media stuff, a lot of the way people are perceived and what have you. So I like that that's being mixed in with this relationship between Fire and Ice. Joanne Starr, again, I hope you listened to my interview with her. She talked about her love for these characters and their relationship. Their relationship is in need of repair right now. And in a way, they are very different. And Starr is really exploring that, the way that, because they are so different, they're reacting to the situation very differently. And yeah, they're at odds by the time this issue ends. So yeah, the art by Bustos is so good storytelling. It's not my favorite style. It's a little bit, it almost feels a little juvenile, a little cartoonish. But yeah, I thought overall this was a good start. I'm curious to see where it goes from here. One more thing I will say about Bustos' art is it does suit the story more so than some sort of a Greg Land type style would, or the style that we see on the covers. A lot of these covers of women, Fire and Ice, look very sexy, very beautiful. I don't know that the story would play as well if it was that sort of style. The little bit more cartoony style sort of suits I don't want to say zaniness, but it suits the story, how things are a little bit up in the air, more so than almost a traditional comic book style with kind of the good girl art would, in my mind. The colors are fantastic as well. So what do you think of this issue, Rock?
I honestly, my review would be just absolutely, I would feel I want to play script doctor from beginning to end, and that's just wrong of me because I got to review the comic as written. Look, this was just boring, just really boring to me. It just wasn't exciting. What this felt like Gilmore Girls. This felt like Gilmore Girls.
That's fair. Yeah.
Except it had one thing that Gilmore Girls had one thing that this comic doesn't, and that's men. And I mean, I counted the men in this issue. There was one man. There was a villain on a piece of paper where when Fire is going through a list of villains that to possibly fight in order for popularity, and then there was I think that showed the back of a guy and back of a male head in a diner. But anyways, now I know I've sort of harped on that before, but the reason why there was a missed opportunity here is I think that the art, it's interesting that you mentioned the art because I think that the art should have been more sexualized. I view Fire and Ice as very sexual characters, and I think wouldn't have it been more funny? And by the way, there is humor in this comic. There is humor, and it's good humor. So I want to give some credit. I did laugh out loud, especially at the end there when the character that I'll mention in a bit shows up. So this does have humor, and the dialogue I think is good. But I will say that they're in Smallville, Kansas, and don't tell me there aren't men in diners. And imagine a small, I don't care what anybody says, you got a white male from Kansas staring at Fire and Ice. You're going to get some comments there. I thought the opportunity for humor in the spirit of the Justice League International, I think it was just ripe. Can you imagine a bunch of rednecks walking into a diner and there's Martha Kent sitting with Fire and Ice? I mean, I just think there's missed opportunities there. But all there was, we met a lot of characters. Tamarin, an African American person who they hired to be another beautician because they end up working at this beauty shop or this beauty emporium called the Big T's. I love the name, the Big T's. That's perfect for Fire and Ice. I also think when I think of Fire and Ice, what surprised me that the approach that that writer Joanne Starr took, which really surprised me, was that I would have thought Fire and Ice would be more famous. She basically stole the script right out of Booster Gold and Blue Beetle. I mean, Fire wants to do what Booster Gold does. I mean, basically fight crime. I mean, it was basically almost an identical plot, except with Booster Gold and Blue Beetle by Dan Jurgens, there was just more going on. There was more action. And I just thought that I would have liked to have seen more opportunity here it lacked to me. Kudos to the art. They could render a small town. The visuals for the small town were there, but there should have been. I think more of a male presence there. I thought it would have been. Even male men. I mean, how funny would it be if a bunch of men were outside the Big T? Suddenly all these men want haircuts. Why? Well, Fire and Ice is there. I think of Fire like the Kim Kardashian of the DC universe. She should be all over social media. But Fire and Ice in this storyline, they're unknown. Nobody in town even cares that they're there. I can't believe that. This is Fire and Ice. This is Smallville. I mean, how often do they get like superheroes like that? I mean, yes, I know they get Superman, but still, this is a... I just think she made them ordinary. Joanne Starr, the writer, made them very, very ordinary. And I would rather have had them have a little bit more gravitas as superheroes. And again, that's unfair of me. That's playing script doctor. The dialogue was good. And it's really funny at the end when Ambush Bug shows up. Fire has this master plan of she wants to beat up Ambush Bug and film it on social media and post it. And that's funny. And Ambush Bug has a great line. It's a great retort between them at the end. It's quite, it's funny. But I can't help but feel a little bit disappointed. I'm all for the sexuality. I do feel a little bit disappointed in the art only because I wanted these characters sexualized. I did. I wanted them more sexualized. And I can't help but point out the juxtaposition between the covers and the interior. And you mentioned it already, Jace. You got highly sexualized covers of these two, which are, these are powerful, sexualized women of the DC universe. And then within the comic book itself, you've got almost this animated feel to the art, and it's just it's jarring, and I think the covers frankly are misleading because of that. And in any event, I'm not super excited as to where this is going because we got Ambush Bug to look forward to, and what's the big plot? Fire and Ice want to find purpose in their life. That's not what I want in a superhero comic, but I don't know. It's not for me, but hopefully it'll find an audience.
Yeah, it's interesting to use that. So I mean, Superman's in it, King Shark's in it. They're male, so I didn't really. Yeah, well, Elron, although he's asexual because he's a robot, but he seems to be kind of a male voice as well. But I mean, you've made that statement before. I don't know. It never bothers me. I feel like, man, with the comics when I was a kid, it was all guys, and if you had females in there, they were just a damsel in distress. So it's kind of nice to have some books where doesn't even have to be a single male character at all.
There's no many birds of prey, so I don't mind that. But there's a reason for that. But this isn't a town. You're in a small Kansas town, and there's no men. There's no men in pickup trucks. It's all women.
Well, we don't get you mentioned the you mentioned the supporting cast. We get Ma Kent. We get a waitress, Raquel, I think her name is Rocky.
Yeah,
she says her name is.
Yeah,
we get Tamarin, but really we don't get that many other townspeople at all. So male or female. So yeah, I imagine that'll expand at some point. But it is interesting, right? Like, yeah, you want to DC wants to sell the comic. They want the comic to sell. So yeah, you're gonna, and thank God that there are more women reading comics than ever because we need to grow the readership. But still, the vast majority of people that read comics are men. So yeah, you're gonna put some nice looking women on the cover because they want it to sell. But yeah, then you open it up and it's not that. So it is interesting. It is. I don't want to say hypocritical because you can understand why they do it, but yeah, I think misleading was the word you used. Yeah, that it probably is a bit misleading. Um, but I mean, in a way, I'm okay with it. Yes, I like looking at Fire and Ice when they're drawn, very beautifully and they're strong characters and what have you. But at the same time, it's nice to read a story where the point of the story isn't the fact that they're hot. The point of the story is going to be that they are, it's going to be their relationship and what they can learn from being in Smallville. You made the comparison to Gilmore Girls. That's an interesting one and a good one in a way. And you said it as sort of I don't not derogatory, but
Well,
that's not what you typically would expect. And
yeah.
I don't expect to pick up a superhero comic and read an episode of Gilmore Girls. I'm not Gilmore Girls. That's not my thing, right? Like it's my wife's favorite show of all time. I watched the first season with her. And I was like, okay, quality show, what have you. And then I started watching the second season. I was like, this is the same thing all over again. This neurotic woman and her daughter, and everybody's just talking a mile a minute. It's not for me. I'm out, right? And that's fine. It can exist on its own. It's not a bad show, whatever. It's just not what I'm into. But very, very popular. So when you say, hey, Gilmore Girls in a comic, Gilmore Girls was popular. Why can't this comic be popular? Well, again, you got to look at who the target audience is, and are people that love Gilmore Girls, i.e., my wife, are they looking to go and pick up a comic about Fire and Ice and have it read like Gilmore Girls? First of all, my wife's never going to go pick up Fire and Ice, so yeah, it's interesting. We'll have to see how it plays out. Yeah, I mean, again, Star is a huge fan of Fire and Ice, a huge fan of that Justice League run from Giffen, DeMatteis, and McGuire. So we'll see how it goes. All right. Up next, we have Blue Beetle #1. It's from the same creative team that brought us the recent 6-issue series where we were introduced to a couple of other Beetles, Green Beetle and Yellow Beetle. So Josh Trujillo is the writer. Adrian Gutierrez is the artist. Will Quintana does colors. Lucas Gattoni on letters. If you guys checked out the Blue Beetle movie, I hope you all did. It was a lot of fun. A little bit more of a confident, a little bit more of a capable Jaime Reyes here is what comes across. He's trying to teach these other two Beetles how to be heroes, basically. And then we also have members of the Horizon. We saw that at the end of the last issue. They're in Palmera City. A little bit kind of hitting us over the head with the idea of illegal aliens and minorities and prejudice and that sort of thing. I think it's okay as long as we don't get too much of it. Because again, I just don't think it's something that that people are really going to enjoy reading about. But it's an important conversation to have. So along with Blue Beetle and Dynasties and Natita, we do have members of the Horizon, that these aliens that probably have some powers of their own. Plus, we've got Ted Kord. So there's no lack of superpowered beings here, or action, if you will, because there is someone else who shows up, and he almost looks like a red Beetle, but I don't know if it's someone that we've seen before. He shows up at the end. His costume takes out Ted Kord, like maybe in, I mean, not a permanent fashion because Ted Kord's already been killed. I don't think they're going to kill him again, but he stabs him through the chest at the end. It's brutal, but we don't know who he is. So we'll see. There's a lot going on here between Jaime Reyes, Blue Beetle, again, trying to train Natita and train Dynasties and Blue Beetle's family, and then the Horizon analog for, illegal aliens, immigrants, what have you, people seeking asylum. And then on top of all that, you have the real dynamic art of Adrian Gutierrez, which I enjoy Gutierrez's art. However, I do not recall in the first series that he was using that ink splatter technique that I'm not a fan of, and I've talked about many times on the podcast of not being a fan of. particularly in Batgirls most recently with Jorge Corona's art where he splattered it. And sure enough, a few pages in, we've got that ink splatter technique from Adrian Gutierrez. I'm just not. I mean, and he uses it heavily here, even on pages where he doesn't use black ink splatter. Maybe it's a page with Nitida. He uses, and that's the green Beetle, and so we've got green ink splatter. And then later on, when this villain shows up that confronts Ted Kord, he's red, so we've got red ink splatter. I don't know. I don't know when this trend started, but I know Jim Lee uses it. Maybe they're like, well, if it's good enough for Jim Lee, it's good enough for me. I just don't care for it. It just makes the art look messy, and I'm just not a fan of it. Which is too bad because I think the art, other than that, is really strong. I don't think that the art needs that. I don't know if Adrian Gutierrez just is trying to add texture. I mean, there are times where all we get is sort of a color palette background with ink splatter on it. So maybe it's saving him time. Again, I'm not really sure. I just know that I'm not a fan of it. But that being said, I did enjoy this issue. It did feel like it ties in a lot with the tone of the recent film. So I hope it works as a jumping on point for people that saw the movie, liked it, and are looking for a Blue Beetle comic. What were your thoughts on it, Rocky?
I really enjoyed it. And it's funny. I thought that I don't mind. It's funny when the other artist that ink effect was on Batgirl.
Jorge Corona.
Jorge Corona. Yeah. I didn't like when he used it here. For some reason, I actually quite enjoy it here. I think it works.
Corona, when Corona did it, it was always just black.
Yeah.
At least Adrian Gutierrez is using, sometimes it's yellow, sometimes it's red, sometimes it's green. Yeah. So maybe that's why.
Yeah, maybe that's why I like it more here, because it does have, especially in the scenes, the funny thing is I'm not a Power Rangers fan. And I don't care if I'm not a Power Rangers fan, but I'm really starting to like the idea of different color Blue Beetles here. A Blue Beetle, Green Beetle. Okay, I know it's Natita and Dynasties. They look really cool. And then of course there's a red Blue Beetle, a red Beetle. We're not sure what his or her name is, that ends up attacking brutally Ted Kord at the end, and I'm really interested, and I'm invested in this story already. I thought this was a fantastic opening issue. I love the art. I'm invested already. You didn't need to read Blue Beetle Graduation Day. You didn't need to read the previous series to get up to speed as to what's going on here. You could go into this series. You can go into this issue pretty much brand new, and you'll figure out what's going on. I thought that there was a family aspect already. There's a rapport between all of the between Dynasties, Natita and Jamie Reyes, and even Ted Kord, when his dialogue when he's battling against this red Beetle at the end, I think it works really well. And wow, Ted Kord, man, as he himself says, he has all the luck. Doomsday, and then of course Maxwell Lord. He's always getting killed, and then of course he seemingly gets killed at the end. But hopefully he's Ted Kord's still alive. But I really thought this was a great issue, and I thought it's definitely, this is probably one of my recommends for people if you want a good issue just to get going. I think this Blue Beetle #1, I think, this is pretty good. So especially if you're a fan of the movie, to give this a look-see.
Yeah, I agree. Again, it really captures the tone of the movie really, really well. So, all right, up next we have City Boy. This is issue #4 from writer Greg Pak. Minku Zheng is the artist. Sebastian Cheng on colors. Wes Abbott on letters. You kick us off on this one, Rocky. What'd you think?
Yeah, sorry. I just got to... All right. Well, this 4th issue of City Boy finds Cameron, City Boy, making his way to Bloodhaven. Last issue, he was in Metropolis, and we discovered that City Boy has the ability to channel into and give life to an avatar of any particular city. So so the essence or the memory of the city, the memories of a city, Cameron, City Boy, can actually peer into the past, and in all the living souls of a city, he can peer into the past of all the people who have lived in the city in the past, and he can see their stories. And what writer Greg Pak does effectively here is at the beginning of this issue, now that he's in Bloodhaven, I love the callback to the fact that Bloodhaven was destroyed. It was decimated in a nuclear explosion back in leading up to the events of Final Crisis. It was Deathstroke dropped chemo on Bloodhaven and destroyed Bloodhaven, much to the chagrin of Nightwing, who wasn't much of a protector back then. And ultimately, revenge was obtained by Green Arrow, taken in Identity Crisis. But that's a callback. But I like the fact that Cameron here he can see his mother. He's really curious to see what his mother was up to, because he was abandoned. His mother abandoned him, and he looks back and he sees that his mother was happy at one point, and he sees himself as a younger person with the mother, and he almost sees it as a ghost, as a playback. It's really, really interesting. I'm still trying to get a handle in terms of what City Boy's powers are, but City Boy is afraid to peer farther into the future in order to see why his mother abandoned him, because he just can't. He's afraid to almost look into that. And meanwhile, the city of Bloodhaven begins to speak to him, and it tells it what it needs or what it wants. And of course, he runs into Nightwing, and Nightwing is there investigating Intergang, because Nightwing spoke to, I believe, it's a Superman in Metropolis, and he's looking for this Nugent character, this Jeannie Nugent character who apparently works for Intergang, and Nightwing basically wants City Boy's help in the investigations. And unfortunately, what ends up happening, and I gotta pull up my here we go here. Yeah. So basically, what he ends up doing is City Boy ends up finding trinkets that will help Nightwing in his investigation, but City Boy himself doesn't want. He wants to join Nightwing. He doesn't want Nightwing to just do all the investigating himself, and he's afraid that Nightwing might hurt her, this Nugent, and he's very protective. And meanwhile, they end up running into this Dr. Macarison, who is involved with Intergang, and the city then starts to lose control of the city. And it's quite clear that City Boy's powers are a little bit out of control. And Darkseid still wants to control City Boy. Darkseid still wants to control Cameron, because Darkseid, at least in City Boy's mind, wants to basically take control of the world. Unfortunately for City Boy, he still has a lot of issues that he has to work through. I didn't mind this issue. I thought the art, I wasn't a big fan. For some reason, I wasn't a big fan of the cover art. Minkyu Jung's art I thought it was a little bit, I didn't find it be very detailed in the issue, but it was okay. But I want a little bit more here for a storyline that is supposed to involve Apocalypse and Darkseid. I was quite there should be more excitement in this issue. But I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that we are linking City Boy with Intergang and through Intergang Darkseid, I mentioned it last time, it really helps to integrate him into the DC universe proper really well. So I appreciated that. Having Nightwing show up here, City Boy, I thought that was a really good mentor for City Boy, even though he sort of pushes back against it. Because his powers are out of control. He is a little bit overwhelmed. You can understand, you can feel his conflict. He's abandoned by his mother, but it doesn't make sense to him that, like, why would you abandon me to go have another family? Why are you leaving the family that you had to go be with another family? So, but then at the same time, there's this sense of City Boy sort of torturing himself. Like, if your mom decided to go have another life and leave you behind, don't torture yourself by watching it. You're just bringing yourself more pain. So, yeah, there's some conflict there, and it sort of mirrors the conflict that City Boy has in the way he's trying to use his powers. He wants to use his powers to help, and when Nightwing asks for his help in finding Jeannie Nguyen, he is willing to help, but then at the same time, he sort of flies off the handle when he thinks that Nightwing is going to incarcerate Jeannie Nguyen, right? When Nightwing really just wants to help her, wants to give her a chance to get away, put her in a safe house, get her out of the clutches of Inner Gang and thus Apocalypse. But City Boy, he doesn't have the experience. He doesn't really know Nightwing. He doesn't trust, and why would he? Basically, he grew up on the streets. He was abandoned by the one person that was supposed to, care about him. So he has trust issues. You would expect that. But at the same time, there's a part of you that reads the story going, dude, it's Nightwing. You got to trust Nightwing. Like, if you're worried about what he might do to Jeannie Nguyen, why didn't you ask? Well, what are you going to do once you find her? Then at the same time, you could take his side and go, well, Nightwing, why didn't you tell him? Why don't you tell City Boy, hey, I want to help her. I want to put her in a safe house. I want to get her away from Inner Gang, that sort of thing. So a little bit of that Three's Company, which I might be dating myself talking about that sitcom, but it's always, you can describe every episode of Three's Company by saying there's a misunderstanding.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So there's a lack of communication. There's a lack of understanding between these characters for no other reason other than they just don't communicate. It would have taken one sentence from either of them to have avoided the conflict that happened in the middle. But then you have an issue without any action, and maybe you don't want that either. So as far as the art goes, I feel like it's pretty consistent with what the art has been throughout. It's been solid, but I think it more, if the art comes across as a little boring, I think it has more to do with the fact that there wasn't a whole lot of action in this issue. It's a little bit more of a setup issue than we've had previously. So I thought Jung's art was fine, just not a whole heck of a lot to work with. But I also find it interesting and enjoyed at the end when City Boy takes himself out of the city, right? Like, hey, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I can't control my powers. The best thing to do, maybe take myself out of the city so I can go and, lay down in the green and kind of get away and not let my powers spin out of control. And then, of course, if you're talking about DC and you're talking about the green, of course, we're talking about Swamp Thing, which is teased as showing up next. So we'll see how that all plays out. But yeah, I'm enjoying City Boy. I think he's an interesting character. He's got a lot of problems, a lot of hangups, I guess you could say. It's not surprising based on his life up to this point, based on his background, based on his age, 16, 17-year-old kid. Of course, he's going to have growing pains and trust issues based on his mother abandoning him and what have you, but definitely a lot of potential. And he comes across as a very realistic character in the hands of Greg Pak and this creative team. So good job. All right, you mentioned this one earlier. So it's Birds of Prey #1, written by Kelly Thompson, art by Leonardo Romero, colors by Jordi Belair, letters by Clayton Cowles. Give us your thoughts.
Yeah, I was pleased with this issue. I was really, you and I reviewed Kelly Thompson's The Call #1. We did a deep dive into that, and we were both very impressed with that. And I'm happy with the Birds of Prey here. Initially, when I read this issue, and basically this issue involves Black Canary. This is a recruitment issue. You don't need to know anything going into this, and this is just Black Canary recruiting a bunch of superpowered, superpowered women to help her on a mission, and you don't know what that mission is until the very end. And so the whole issue is just her trying to decide who to have on her team, and of course she chooses all the members of her team. They're on the cover, and what I love this team. First, I want to say I love the team. Big Barda, Cassandra Cain, Black Canary, Zealot, and Harley Quinn. I got to tell you, the biggest wild card there was Harley Quinn. When I first read this, I thought to myself, why is Harley Quinn part of this team? And then Now the easy answer is because DC wants it that way, because Harley Quinn had a movie called Harley Quinn in Birds of Prey. But in terms of Harley Quinn is not really, you don't think of as a comic book reader, I don't think of Harley Quinn when I think of Birds of Prey at all. So there had to be some justification for it. And I like the way Kelly Thompson sort of justified it through Cassandra Cain. I thought it was interesting that Kelly Thompson, because it reaches a point where Black Canary, throughout the issue, she recruits Big Barda. Big Barda says yes. Cassandra Cain right away says yes. Zealot owes her a favor, so Zealot is pretty much obligated to Black Canary for reasons which we don't know yet, but Zealot owes Black Canary one. And so why Harley Quinn? Well, Cassandra Cain said Harley Quinn. And I found it very interesting as to how and why Cassandra Cain seems to have some empathy for Harley Quinn insofar. Maybe it's because they were both previous killers, and maybe, Harley Quinn's trying to be a hero now in Gotham, but also because Harley Quinn in their last fight really impressed Cassandra Cain, almost defeated her in battle. I have no idea when Harley Quinn learned the leopard blow and learned the eagle stance and somehow learned all these fancy karate moves. But in my head canon, I can imagine maybe Harley Quinn learned those things with the Suicide Squad, maybe learned those things somewhere in the multiverse, because as you and I, we've talked about Harley Quinn in the past, Jace, you and I, and Harley Quinn has been so many different things to so many different writers. Who's to say Harley Quinn isn't an A-list fighter? I mean, good Lord, right? But in any event, I really like it. I love what the mission is at the end. I love I love the character at the end with the future version of Max of Maps from Gotham Academy. I thought that's awesome. And what the mission is to rescue Sin, who is now 16 years old, and to rescue her. I'll let you talk about what the mission is, but I thought the art was great. I really enjoyed the art. Romero on the art, really good. Jordi Belair in the colors. I thought it really worked well. And for those watching on YouTube, I'll go through some of the preview pages as Jace gives his opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned this as a recruitment issue and not needing to know anything going into it, and that's 100% true. Kelly Thompson's one of my favorite creators, and as I'm reading this, I'm like, okay, this is good. This is interesting. It's really focusing on sort of the dynamic between these characters as they're being put together. Big Barda may be one of the more inconsistently written characters in the DC universe. Sometimes she talks just like a regular old American, if you will. Here she has language that is a little more purple, a little more flowery, if you will. And I sort of like it. I like the way that the vocabulary she uses and kind of her cadence of speaking and what have you that Kelly Thompson gives her. It feels a little more like realistic, like what her language would be, having grown up on apocalypse and what have you in the environment that she did. So I do like that. Plus, I like that she's drawn so much larger than Zealot and Cassandra Cain. I mean, she's almost twice as tall as Cassandra Cain, which, yeah, she should be. She's Big Barda. So, yeah, I'm really enjoying it, really enjoying the recruitment issue. I echo your I wasn't surprised to see Harley Quinn because she's so popular. You're going to throw her on there. But interesting that when the time comes to Black Canary says, yeah, we need somebody else. Who should we get? Oh, Harley Quinn. Cassandra Cain makes the case for her. And it makes a lot of sense what she says, how she's not predictable. So I really appreciated that. But that being said, this isn't anything. The issue starts out as not anything groundbreaking. Did I enjoy it? Yes, I enjoyed it because it's Kelly Thompson and she's great at characterization, and the interaction between the characters is fantastic. And her take on Harley is a little bit different than from what we've seen before, and so I really appreciate that as well. So that all really, really works. And then because it's Kelly Thompson, once we get to the very end and we have Maps Mizuguchi show up in this future form, and I had to go and look. I'm like, I haven't read all of Gotham Academy. I don't think I've read any of Gotham Academy actually, but I've read Maps and other things, Batman, Urban Legends, and some other one shots and what have you. And I was like, wait, Maps has a future version of herself that that maybe has superpowers, something to do with time travel, whatever. Meridian? What?
Yeah.
Has this person shown up before? Has this version of Map shown up before? The short answer is no. So I guess speculator alert, right? As Rocky likes to say, this is the first appearance of Maps Mizuguchi's future version of herself, Meridian. I'm curious to hear more about what powers she might have, and who knows what origin she might have, and if we'll find that out. So that was interesting. Kelly throwing us a little bit of curveball, and then all along it's teased that they're putting this this group together because they've got to go and rescue Sin, right? And you figure, well, Sin, she must have been kidnapped by some supervillain or another, and Birds of Prey, this team's going to get together and they're going to go and rescue her from, God, who could it be? Count Vertigo, or I don't even know that Black Canary really has any rogues, villains of her own, but who could it be? Cobra, some kind of villain organization like that. I don't know that it would be Brother Blood, but you're expecting it to be some villainous group. No, what we find out is, okay, Maps Maguchi or Meridian says, yeah, you've got to go rescue Sin from the island of Themyscira, stop the Amazons from bringing about the end of the world. And my head just exploded, right? Like, wait, what? The Amazons are the antagonists here? The Amazons are the ones that kidnap Sin? What's going to be their reason? What do they have going on? Like, this was completely unexpected. And yet at the same time, what I've come to expect from Kelly Thompson, right? Like, absolutely amazing characterization, amazing storytelling. Really, yeah, I was blown away by this. Again, it was enjoyable, really good recruitment issue, really quality, good art. But then when I get thrown that curveball at the end from Kelly Thompson, I was really blown away. And the art from Leonardo Romero, it's sort of what I would call no frills art. Like, it definitely gets the job done, but it's not real flamboyant art. So, I appreciated that, and it sort of suited the character focus of the story really, really well. So you don't want the art to be really flashy when you're focused on characterization and interacting between characters, in my mind, because the art can distract. But it's just the kind of understated art that has really good storytelling and transitions from panel to panel, and shows a lot of emotion and body language, so that, again, it allows the characterization and the interaction between these females to really shine. And again, you mentioned it when we talked about Fire and Ice and Smallville, how there weren't male characters and you missed them. I don't think there's a single male character in this one, but you didn't miss it. There didn't need to be a male character here, so I don't know. I find that interesting. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, well, in Smallville, they were in a small town, and there was no men in the town, and there was no men walking around even in the background. And that's what I found interesting. This one is just focused. This is Birds of Prey, and they're just focusing this, going around and recruiting, and specifically approaching the women in the middle of at night in the various settings. That makes sense to me. Plus, kudos to Kelly Thompson, because the question has to be asked: why would Black Canary be dumb enough to only recruit women? Well, now we have an explanation. When you're breaking onto Themyscira, you can only be women, because otherwise the Amazons will immediately know the moment a man sets foot on Paradise Island, boom, they know because of the magical nature of Themyscira. So kudos to her. It makes sense. So the team formation, the formative origin of this team, being grounded in the fact that this is started with a mission to invade or to rescue breakout Sin from Themyscira, and so obviously you can only have women. That makes sense, and it works out so well for an opening issue and for a recruitment issue. And I just think that overall, now the real test is going to be, where do we go from here? And I'm looking forward to it. I know that Kelly, the dialogue is, I love the dialogue. She has a handle on all these characters. I really like her use of how she writes Cassandra Cain and how she writes Dinah Lance. I actually really like that. I'm a huge Cassandra Cain fan, and I thought it worked really well here. And I'm really curious. I thought she also nailed Harley Quinn at the end there when Harley Quinn's comments when they find out what their mission is, I thought was just priceless. So it's good. I'm looking forward to this, and I don't. God forbid we might have somebody that is as good as Gail Simone was on this title. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, when was the last? Is that the last time you really enjoyed Birds of Prey? Was Gail Simone's run?
Pretty much, yeah, yeah,
A long time ago.
yeah. It was.
All right, up next we have Justice Society of America, issue number 6. This is from writer from writer Jeff Johns. Marco Santucci handles the art, Yvonne Placencia on colors, Rob Lee on letters. Some fantastic covers again. Mikhail Yanin's cover. He's on the main cover, and his stuff's just always so classic in my mind. But there's also a fantastic 1 in 25 Huntress cover from Edwin Galman. There's a Hispanic Heritage cover with the Yolanda version of Wildcat by Pablo Villalobos, and then Yannick Paquette does the B cover with Huntress on it. So we start off on the very first page with Jeff Johns reminding us how closely this title ties into his Stargirl and the Lost Children from Jeff Johns and Todd Knock, which was a very fantastic series. And we're reminded that, these sidekicks that, disappeared from history were brought back, and now they're trying to find their place in the world. Meanwhile, the other members of the Justice Society are sitting around the table discussing their recent battle with Perdegaton, which, again, really, really great story. And then we start to explore some of the fallout that we're going to see with the sidekicks showing back up, these forgotten sidekicks. Judy Garrick, Jay Garrick's daughter, who he'd forgotten that she even existed. So, I mean that's just great, right? Joan and Jay Garrick and Judy, all the Jays, and we know there's going to be a series by Jeremy Adams, favorite writer of Rocky and mine both, that's going to explore the Boom, as her name is, which is a really great name. We've got so many different Flash characters, you can start to run out of names at one point. So that's all going to be explored. Plus Helena Wayne, right? Like this version of Huntress, who was sort of the impetus for this whole New Justice Society series, who traveled back in time to warn the Justice Society of what Perdegaton was doing. And everybody warned her, you cannot go and tell your father about his impending death. You can't go and try to save Batman because you'll alter the timeline. Well, she did it anyway. She went and told her father anyway, which you can completely understand. I think many of us would have done the same. But she did alter the timeline. She altered the timeline to the point where she no longer exists. The timeline that she was a part of no longer exists. She can't go home again, as it were. And so what does that mean for her, and how this is all going to play out? There's a great interaction between Dr. Fate and what's her name? The Witch Girl, Salem the Witch Girl. That gives us a rundown of the different Dr. Fates that we've had over time. So again, sort of a catch-up issue, if you will, getting all the characters in place. We find out what Helena Wayne is going to do now that she is sort of she's a woman out of time. Her timeline no longer exists. She's not just going to sit idly by. And so we learn at the end what she's going to be up to. And she goes and has a conversation with Power Girl, who, I don't know if you noticed this, Rocky. Did you notice that she called Power Girl Karen? Not Paige.
Yeah, and Paige never, and Karen never corrected her, or Paige never corrected her.
Yeah. So I don't know, maybe Jeff Johns didn't get the memo. Maybe this was written, before they changed her name. I don't know that her name needs to be changed, but I have a feeling that was an editorial decision. But anyway, great art, great ideas here to be explored. The only problem I have with Justice Society, and I know you know what I'm going to say, it just needs to come out on time. these delays are just robbing it of its momentum, and I just don't think it's sustainable. It's not going to go. It's not going to have a long run if it keeps being constantly late. So anyway, what were your thoughts on it?
Well, just to build on your comments about the lateness, I mean, Power Girl got a new name, Paige. What was that? That was 3 or 4 months. Was that 3 months ago? 2 months ago?
Yeah, 2 or 3 months
It's
ago.
been a while, so that's how
June.
late. Yeah, that's how late this was, because usually something. I mean, look, I know we can be critical of DC's editorial at the best of times, but that is kind of a big mistake. That's a pretty big miss, screwing up somebody's name. But having said that, as someone who didn't agree with the name change to begin with, I always think of Power Girl as Karen, not Paige, but that's a minor matter. I like the fact that the Huntress is teaming. This is the classic Huntress Power Girl. I love that Huntress and Power Girl are together in this issue. That they're forming a new Justice Society, or rather, not a new Justice Society. They're adding to the membership. And in fact, even right on the cover is one of the rare covers that's actually indicative of the content of a comic book. Imagine that. I mean, they're choosing a new legacy, not only a new legacy of heroes for the Justice Society, but Huntress has already changed time by telling her dad about his future, and she also makes an allusion. She warns Bruce Wayne. She warns her dad that, by the way, when you go back to Gotham, you and mom are about to have one hell of a fight. And of course, that's an allusion to Gotham War, which I thought was kind of funny. But Huntress wants to add to the JSA by adding Solomon Grundy, the Harlequin's son, and the Gentleman Ghosts and Ruby, who are actually villains who will ultimately be redeemed in the future. So there's a mixture of Huntress's is she's sort of an aberration. She's a multiversal outlier like Power Girl. She's got the memories of a future that is not going to happen, but parts of it probably will. So she's an interesting character now. And I really hope that we see more of Huntress in the pages. If we do get a Power Girl series or any kind of future Power Girl stories with Leah Williams, I really hope that Huntress plays a part, because I think Power Girl and Huntress, whether it's Paige or Karen, I think they have a lot in common. And I'd really like to see that bond formalized, that friendship really grow. And, and of course there's Yolanda, Salem the Witch Girl, Judy Garrick the Boom. You mentioned all of them. I thought not a heck of a lot happened in this issue, and I think that minimizes the consequence of the delay, because so little happens. This is really just setting up a new Justice Society, and it can almost exist in its own world, because none of these characters. Well, I shouldn't say that, but it seems to be in almost its own kind of world, and so it hasn't really, I think, impacted anything except for the name of Power Girl. There, I think it's relatively minor, the consequence of these delays, but it is very, very frustrating. I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, I love Jeff Johns on DC titles, but yeah, his stuff always seems to be late. I want to point the finger at John specifically. A lot of times he has detailed artists, but no matter what artist, they're late. It's just tough. So anyway, up next we have Peacemaker Tries Hard, book number 5, written by Kyle Starks. Art is by Steve Pugh. Colors by Jordy Belair. Letters by Becca Carey. This was a heck of a lot of fun. What did you think of it, Rock?
This continues to be just thoroughly entertaining. I continue to be. This is just laugh out loud fun. This is like this could be like season 2 of Peacemaker, or is it season 3 now? Whatever. Kyle Starks has done a good job. Steve Pugh on the art is just, it's hilarious. The art is just he draws a perfect Peacemaker. Like, I mean, it's like literally watching the show. And in this issue, I mean, who would have thought of a bunch of infant babies with an eye patch? Looking like miniature little Slade Wilsons. It's hilarious what happens. We have an older Red Bee and Peacemaker going to take down to basically try to take on Deathstroke, and ultimately they end up Red Bee ends up unfortunately almost losing his life, and his soul bee, like Red Bee, has a one bumblebee that flies around, and the bumblebee's never had to sting anybody before, and but it ends up having to give his life to save Red Bee, and it's like it's a bunch of artificially heightened emotion, but yet somehow it works, and it's hilarious, it's funny, it's entertaining. I personally, I'm getting the movie covers. I'm getting like the movie variants of all these covers, and I'm actually I'm I've been enjoying this. Not only am I enjoying the covers, but I'm enjoying the story as well. And this to me doesn't need to be part of the DC universe. I don't know if it is or not. It doesn't matter to me. This story is entertaining in and of itself. This is one of the ones that I buy. I buy the physical copies of this, and because it's that entertaining. I don't mind paying the extra cost because it is more of an expensive. It is Black Label, so I can't remember the price. I think it is like $5.99 or $6.99, but I don't care. It's worth it. The art's fantastic, and yeah, this is definitely one of this is a must buy. I think if you this is what comic books should be about, just plain fun entertainment, put a smile on your face, and especially if you're a fan of the show. So, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of it as well. Like you said, laugh out loud funny. That being said, this was a little bit of a down issue for me. I didn't find myself laughing as much as previous issues, but it's still a heck of a lot of fun. You do have to have these sort of down issues that at times it sort of just move the story along. But having this angsty teen version of Deathstroke was great. The baby scene, I was like, oh man. It's funny, but at the same time, like, man, is anything sacred? Like, they won't fight the clones of the Brain's original body, which I think they refer to themselves as janitors or engineers or what have you. But they fight the babies. But at least we don't get like actual scenes of them punching babies. But the Steve Pugh art and the limited color palette in the action scenes where we just get like two colors works really, really well. And then, they find Bruce Wayne. They realize, Red Bee realizes that the Brain was the one behind the war wheel, which killed what he refers to as his boys, his platoon back in the war. And then he goes after and tries to attack the War Maker, which is what the Brain calls himself when he's in this clone body of Deathstroke. So it's a lot of fun. The heroic sacrifice by Michael, obviously, which again can't be in regular DC continuity, as Rocky mentioned, because that Bee sacrifices himself. But yet we just saw that Bee in the pages of Justice Society, which I don't know, maybe could have been Michael Jr. How does a Bee live that long anyway? And then the Brain, when Red Bee manages to take out the clone body of Deathstroke that the Brain is in, then they drop Monsieur Mala drops the Brain into chemo, whichever pronunciation you prefer, and then the Brain basically has the body of Chemo. So I mean, just absolutely ludicrous what happens in these Peacemaker issues. Just the zaniness, the wackiness. That being said, you're zany and wacky and funny, and you might think, all ages. Definitely not all ages. This is not all ages. Tons of violence, bad language, what have you. Definitely for mature readers. That's why it's Black Label. But it's a heck of a lot of fun. All right, up next we have Steelworks number 4 from writer Michael Dorn, Sami Basri, and Vicente Cifuentes as artists. Andrew Dahlhaus on colors, Rob Lee on letters. I continue to be really, really impressed by the writing of Michael Dorn here. He really has a great understanding of not only John Henry Irons, but also the relationship that John Henry has with Lana Lang. This whole idea of revenge, the Silver Mist character, corporate espionage, 0 point energy reactor, like all these ideas are really fun. And the fact that Dorn writes John Henry Irons as being more aware of even things that us readers aren't aware of. And I know sometimes it can be annoying as a reader when it feels a little ex deus machina when a particular character is kind of one step ahead of us and they do something and it looks like the situation's going one way and something bad has happened, and it turns out that the character was aware all along and sort of set the villain up. I sort of like that, as long as it's not done too much. That's what John Henry Irons has done here with the 0 point energy reactor, which is based on the Genesis technology from Warworld. And so how Dorn is tying it in with events that have happened in the Superman comics in the last couple of years is fantastic as well. Because I was sort of, as we read this, and as Mist tries to steal the 0 point module, and then we find out that it was a dummy, and John Henry Irons is just walking through his building with it out for everybody to see. It turns out that's a dummy as well. But then, unfortunately, the real one does get stolen. So I was ready to call John Henry Irons out for, just walking around. Here you hid this piece of technology because you didn't want anyone to know. And then when seemingly it's stolen, you're walking around with the actual one, showing everybody that it wasn't stolen. But then he sort of outsmarts himself because the real one does get stolen, apparently. So it's almost like a triple take, if you will. But it keeps the story moving. It keeps it exciting. I was really impressed with the art in this issue as well from Bosri and Cifuentes. Really, really well done. The color work is fantastic. Really, again, like the characterization, the voice of Steel that Dorn gives John Henry Irons. Because I've never really been that interested. I think I said before that Steel was the least interesting to me of all the Superman replacements when he died. So I've never had as much fun reading him as I have had in this series so far. So, and again, the Silver Mist character, who, you could kind of compare him to Insomnia with his family. He blames John Henry Irons for the loss of his family, much like Insomnia blames the Justice League for the loss of his family. But although Insomnia wants to take his revenge, the Silver Mist character, doesn't. He sort of has to be forced into it. It's such a different take and a little more refreshing that it's not the same old, oh, I blame you, John Henry Irons. I'm going to go and ruin your life the way you ruined mine. Silver Mist even says at the beginning, when he first gets the powers, he says, well, why would I go along with this revenge scheme that you have? That's not going to bring my family back. So again, that's a little bit refreshing when he confronts whatever his name is, Walker the Third, Charles Walker the Third, when he says, "Yeah, you want me to go along with this, and you're going to give me these powers, and I'm going to go fight Steel. Why? It's for revenge. Why? That's not going to bring my family back. That's a refreshing take rather than falling into the same old trope of, oh, you ruined my life, so I'm going to ruin yours. So again, just not falling into those same old traps and tired story plot points shows that Dorn has a knack for this. So whether or not he writes more, I guess we'll have to wait and see. What'd you think of it?
Yeah, I liked it. I liked how he incorporated the Genesis energy from the Warworld saga, because they had the Genesis fragment, and he incorporated. John Henry Irons has created 0 point energy, and he's still wrestling with the moral dilemma. Well, I've created this. To what extent should he introduce it to society? He's inclined to want to introduce it to society, to create a city that can protect itself. And maybe he dreams of a day and age where the society doesn't necessarily need superheroes. But the fact that there's been some disturbing things that happened to the Superman family with interacting with the Genesis fragment and the 0 point energy. There was that on the Superman Day, or I think was it Metropolis Day, the Action Comics Annual, where something happened to Connor and Supergirl. I suspect what's happening here is, I think John Henry Irons might be heading toward the discovery that this 0 point energy maybe he didn't perfect it as much as he thought. There's going to be some negative consequence to it that's going to make it more dangerous than it actually is, and that will become paramount, or we will discover that in future issues. I'm guessing because the villain here, this Silver Mist, has managed to steal it, and now that this Walker, this leader of ruler, or this corporate guru of Walker Incorporated, has this 0 point energy, and he uses it. something's going to go wrong. You just know something's going to go awry. I agree with you. Michael Doran's done a really good job here of sort of setting everything up, doing a lot of some misdirection. John Henry Irons isn't as smart as he thinks he is. He was outwitted here. He lost the 0 point the device, and it was really good. And I really like the relationship between John Henry Irons and Lana Lang. I like how Michael Dorn is respecting that, and he's given Lana Lang some gravitas, given her some agency that she hasn't had in a long time since going back to her Superwoman series. So I really like that they brought her back, and hopefully she'll play. It looks like she's going to play more of a role moving forward, which is really good to see as well. So yeah, it was a good issue.
All right, up next we have Shazam, issue number 3, written by Mark Waid and Dan Mora. Actually, they're listed as storytellers. Waid writing, Dan Mora drawing. They're probably both plotting. Alejandro Sanchez is on the colors. Dan Mora also did the main cover. And we've got some other covers: John Timms, Chris Somney, Mateus Lopez, Carla Cohen, and Edwin Galman. So one of the things, and maybe, you know what, I'll wait and I'll mention that when we talk about Poison Ivy. What do you think of this?
Well, finally, we're getting into the meat and potatoes of this series because, and I like on the opening page we got all the gods that make up the Shazam name. You know, we got Solomon, Hercules, Atlas, Mercury, Zeus, and Achilles. And the gods of Shazam they're kind of like a little bit jealous. They each want their turn to control Billy Batson. They don't like the way Billy Batson is sort of wasting his powers. And last issue we saw Freddie Freeman walked in on the gods as they were doing their machinations of trying to manipulate Billy Batson. And of course, he stands right up to him. Freddie is a very brave kid, and Mark Waid does a good job of illustrating that. And the gods, all the gods, they laugh at him. Perhaps they tacitly respect his ridiculous bravery, but they cause him, they make him lose his memory. And Freddie becomes an unwitting. He becomes a spy for basically the gods, and he goes back to Billy, and the gods can keep an eye on Billy, but they're very pissed off at Billy because, goddamn, Billy's not changing into Shazam, because Billy knows every time he changes into Shazam, he seems to lose control of his emotions, or he loses controls of his powers, and Billy doesn't really know why. Billy doesn't know that the gods are forcing him to use his powers. He feels he doesn't have control of his powers, and in a sense, he's right. He does have control of them, but he doesn't control the strength of the powers, and it's got a comedic aspect to it. That's what I like, and yet while it's comedic, it possesses enough believability to me that as frustrated as Billy is, Billy can't seem to concentrate. I mean, the wisdom of Solomon seems to be eluding him, because, in fact, Solomon amongst the gods seems to be, unsurprisingly, Solomon is the only member of the gods that I guess isn't really a god, apparently, according to Atlas. And he wants. I think he wants to maybe give Billy some more wisdom, because at times, if Billy has too much strength, the strength of Atlas, or the strength of Hercules, or the courage of Atlas and the strength of Hercules, but he doesn't have enough wisdom, then that's a problem. All of them operate in synchronicity with each other. And so when the gods that make up Shazam aren't working together, and when they're bickering with each other, that has consequences for Billy Batson when he turns into Shazam. And I like the way how Mark Waid shows that struggle with Billy. And Billy's afraid to change into Shazam. And he breaks up, he prevents a bully from harassing another kid, and he gets hit for it. But he refuses to change into Shazam, and he has his own. He's still trying to preserve his moral compass, and finally Zeus gets pissed off at him because they want Billy to change into Shazam, but he won't. So Zeus forces him to change by creating what looks going to happen to be a big accident, a vehicle accident, and it forces Billy to change into Shazam, and more craziness ensues. This is fun. Again, Mark Waid, between this and World's Finest, Mark Waid continues to just plain this. This is a delight to read. It's entertaining. It's fun. Again, this is probably it's not my favorite this week, but this was a lot of fun. Mark Waid really knows he knows these characters, and I had some doubts as to whether or not a bickerings amongst the gods of Shazam, Atlas and Zeus and all that, all their bickerings I thought it would maybe be too silly, but it actually is kind of entertaining. I find myself oddly enough entertained by it. I don't know how Zeus is still alive. I thought he was killed by the Wizard, but I guess you can't kill Zeus. He comes back. I thought he was killed during that Wonder Woman run, but that's neither here nor there. Continuity is a little wonky as it is, but this was really good. The art by Dan Mora is, again, it's just fantastic. I mean, the scenes here are just excellent. The battle sequences, the majesty of Thor, the expressions on the gods themselves, the magic. It looks like a lot's at stake here, and there are still some secrets that we don't know. That there's still some pieces of the puzzle that I haven't quite put together yet. But I'm enjoying the read. What about yourself? Oh, sorry, you're on mute there. Sorry.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I was definitely not expecting to see Gargax show up as a villain in Shazam. Typically he's a Doom Patrol villain, but it's kind of nice to see. And so it seems like, I mean, this first arc that we've gotten from Waid, it seems like it's been sort of focused on Billy's powers getting out of control and him not understanding why, and we're still not 100% understanding why either. But yeah, it is an interesting aspect to have basically the pantheon of gods that give Shazam his powers, saying, hey, he's not being our champion, and Zeus, as you mentioned, sort of forces him into changing. So that feels like, whatever's going on with Billy and his powers, that's going to sort of fade into the background, while exactly what this pantheon of gods have in store for Billy and what they want is going to come a little more to the forefront, as they've basically made Freddy their spy. They can see through Freddy's eyes and hear through Freddy's ears of whatever's going on. So that's going to be a little bit in the background as well. And it seems like this next arc is going to focus on Gargax, Emperor Gargax as he's calling himself, and his moon base. And we'll figure out what Gargax has, what axe he has to grind with the gorillas of Gorilla City, and why they are, or maybe we should turn it around and say, what do the gorillas of Gorilla City have against Gargax? Because Gargax apparently wasn't doing anything to them, wasn't doing anything to the gorillas, and they lied to Billy and said that, yeah, this base on the moon, which is Gargax's base, they're threatening to blow up Gorilla City, when Gargax wasn't doing anything of the sort. So if I know Mark Waid, this will all tie in together. Maybe the gorillas were the ones that were causing Billy's powers to go out of control. Maybe Gargax has something to do with that. How this all ties in with the pantheon of gods, not really sure, but interesting the way that Waid has set things up, where there's all these little subplots going on. The main portion of the series being focused on Billy being out of control and losing his powers, when using his powers rather. And how Mark Waid's going to make that all count in the end, because I promise you he will. That's just what he does. So the art is really, really strong as well. Continues to be great. Gargax looks gigantic and ridiculous with his headband and green skin and purple robe, as he always does when he shows up. So, Dan Mora continues to be a fantastic storyteller. I love that he's credited as a storyteller, as basically a co-plotter, if you will, with Mark Waid on this. Mark Waid passing along his storytelling skills and talent is never a bad thing. So this continues to be a lot of fun. And the other thing that's great about it is you don't have to be reading anything else. You literally don't have to read any other DC comic or have read anything that comes before the Shazam run. I would argue you don't even have to read any of this Shazam run before picking up this issue. You could pick up this issue and sort of hit the ground running, because it definitely feels, I mean, again, only issue 3, so probably pretty easy to go back and pick up issues 1 and 2. But but it definitely seems like Wade is firing on all cylinders, height of his powers right now for sure. Okay, up next we have The Joker, The Man Who Stopped Laughing, number 10. If you forgot this series was coming out, yeah, not surprising. Some delays, and then we had, of course, the 2 months off for the Night Terrors event, which I'll talk about that even more when we talk about Poison Ivy next. But yeah, I'd sort of forgotten about this one as well until I saw the title. But anyway, it's issue number 10. Matthew Rosenberg is the writer. Carmine Di Giandomenico is the artist. Romulo Fajardo Jr. on colors. A bit of a transitional issue, which I suppose we needed. We only get one of the Jokers in this, and we get a backup story with art by Francavilla that's also been written by Matthew Rosenberg, but this time it's sort of in continuity. It's in the story as Joker's in the hospital, and he goes and picks up a comic there and reads it. And what he reads is the Joker story, and in the Joker story in the comic, Joker basically has one of his henchmen that is exposed to Joker gas but doesn't die, and he takes advantage of that by creating sort of a second Joker, if you will. And then when he gets done reading the story, he's like, hold on a second, now I know who created this other Joker that's been running around. It was me. So really, is that the answer? Is the other Joker that's been running around all this time really just somebody that the Joker himself created? I got to be honest, Joker and the idea of 3 Jokers and multiple Jokers and whatever should have never come around in my mind. Somebody at DC editorial should have gone, nah, that's not a good idea. I know it's Jeff Johns, and anything Jeff Johns makes is going to sell or writes is going to sell, but it just didn't work. You know, the 3 Joker story was my biggest disappointment for the year that it came out. I just thought it was terrible, wasn't well executed, and now we were wondering if this Matthew Rosenberg story was going to actually make that make sense. Apparently not. It's not going to make it make sense. You probably can't make it make sense. So I've been trying to stay positive with the series. Matthew Rosenberg is a writer whose work I typically enjoy. This had some strikes against it from the beginning, being that it was a Joker story. I think Joker's overused, but I've been trying to stay positive and trying to look at the things that are working. But this latest revelation, it just had me sort of shaking my head, because it's like we're supposed to care and we're supposed to be invested. And now, and again, this may not be the case, but what this issue seems to insinuate is this other Joker is just some random Joker henchman that got exposed to Joker gas and survived it. What? Like why am I supposed to care? So yeah, I'm just not sure. I'm just not sure what to think. This may be one of those situations where I'm just not going to be able to properly judge this story until I get to the end and see, all the clues that were left and all the context. The rest of the story, the preceding issues will have more context once we get to the end. But then, there's the argument to be made, well, shouldn't you enjoy the journey of getting to the end? Yeah, that you're spending $3-4 a month.
It's a long journey.
That's probably the case, right? It's the investment. But again, it's on me if I'm spending money on a title called The Joker when I'm not a fan of the Joker. And I will say this, DC's really been leaning into the Joker as this idea of this agent of chaos recently. And I will say that the art by Carmine Di Giandomenico is chaotic, and it does sort of convey that take on the Joker, if you will. But again, that's not something that interests me. So whether it's narratively or artistically, this is not a book I would be picking up and reading if it wasn't for the fact that we get these press previews. So I know it's not for me, but I do imagine, and I've said this before, that if Matthew Rosenberg could make the 3 Joker thing make sense, he could maybe do it in such a way the Joker would go from one of my least liked characters to maybe one of my favorite characters. The potential is there, and that's of course setting aside the overuse of the character. But again, Night Terrors interrupted this as well, so it's hard to remember what's going on. And I feel like the Night Terrors Joker book that we got was sort of all over the place as well. So, man, I'm really struggling with the Joker these days. Again, part of it is the overuse of the character. I just get tired of seeing him, and I get tired of the fact that Batman has a hard time defeating the Joker, because let's face it, if Batman were a real character in real life and the Joker were a real character in real life, it would take all of 30 seconds for Batman to beat down on that spindly, non-physically adept human. Like, he doesn't have any fighting skills. He just doesn't, right? He wouldn't be able to stand up to Batman at all. So I just find that to be ridiculous, and it just bugs me. So, yeah, I'm struggling with this one a little bit. But again, recognize the fact it's not for me. I'm not a Joker fan. But it feels a bit, I don't know, it feels a bit of a letdown, anticlimactic, if it turns out that this second Joker was just a Joker henchman that survived Joker gas. So, I don't know. Am I missing something, Rocky?
Well, I don't think you're missing anything. I would put a slightly different spin on it. The way I saw it is that when the Joker read that kid's comic book, and by the way, he was reading a Wonder Woman comic book and it had a Joker story in it. I thought that was really odd. Did you notice that? I thought,
yeah, I did. I thought, well, they put a Wonder Woman cover on it because of Tom King's Wonder Woman. That's what I thought.
Yeah, so I thought, what does that have? What is the Joker doing in a Wonder Woman comic? But in any event, that's neither here nor there. So I think it just jogged. I got the impression it jogged his memory, that not necessarily that he created his own doppelganger from Joker gas, but maybe he did create his doppelganger, but through another means. But it just jogged his memory. Maybe it never occurred to him that he's the cause. It never occurred to the Joker that his own actions may have created his doppelganger, and maybe he caused him to review all the crazy things that he's done to his henchmen, because let's face it, he's killed his henchmen in horrible ways. And theoretically, the Joker's pretty smart too. We forget that the Joker is actually fairly good with chemicals and everything else. So maybe he's sort of put together that, maybe that is possible. And it's kind of funny that he got the idea from a comic book, and I think that was sort of like the inside joke that Matthew Rosenberg, he wants us all to laugh at, because this is the second time now that Rosenberg, the second reference how the comic book kind of was referenced in the story. It was about 3 or 4 issues back. I can't remember this exact manner in which it was, but in any event, I thought it was a little... Unfortunately, I will say that I'm fairly positive this will read much better as a trade, as a 12-issue series from start to finish, because it's hard for us to remember. I mean, a 2-month break coming back into this. I mean, it's hard to remember exactly what the hell happened in previous issues. But then again, we don't really need to remember much, because we just know that there's 2 Jokers running around. I have to admit, I don't know which Joker's which anymore. I'm constantly confused. Just when I think I got a handle on it, I'm wrong. And I think maybe I would get a better handle on it if I just read it all in one sitting. And but these types of stories really don't work well when you're telling one long chase story. And that's really what this was. This is like one long chase story. Or one long treasure hunt / chase story where it doesn't work well in a 12-issue series when you deal with so many multiple different types of characters, and then all the so many members of the Bat family are in this, like between Manhunter, Jason Todd, and what have you, but yet no Batman. Where's Batman again? I guess maybe this is when he's in the middle of a coma. I don't know. But anyways, in fact, wasn't it maybe in this one where they mentioned that? Did they even make a passing reference to Gotham War in this?
Yeah, might have been.
I think they kind of did.
Yeah.
Which, well, I say that because it sort of builds on your point, because that when you and I were arguing with each other earlier off air, this does suggest that there is still crime occurring, but it's just not as, because this references that a lot of the other A-list villains are having a hard time finding henchmen.
Yeah, that's what it is in here. Wesker, the ventriloquist, he said he wanted you to know the men are the henchmen shortage. I think the henchmen shortage the town is experiencing, coupled with the Joker's reputation, has really impacted our potential candidate pool.
Right.
So they reference it. But yeah, the other part of this that you mentioned, and and maybe this is just a theme with Rosenberg. I feel like a lot of times when we review his stuff, we go, well, his stuff would read a lot better in a trade. And it's interesting, right? Because a lot of people say that about Bendis, because his stuff is so decompressed that it reads better as a trade. You feel like you get a bigger chunk of story. I don't feel like that's the case with Rosenberg. His stuff's not necessarily decompressed. You still get a big chunk of story most of the time. Not this particular issue, I'd say. This is a little lighter on moving the narrative forward. But a lot of times in his issues, you get a lot of things that happen. But his stories just tend to have so many characters, and people change allegiances and alliances and whatever. And maybe, again, it's just the sort of nature of the stories he writes, like whether he's writing Wildcats, where people are betraying each other left and right, or he's writing Task Force Z, where people are betraying people left and right, or it's these jokers who are doing crazy things on a whim and, you know, changing directions and thoughts and plans left and right, that it makes it a little hard to follow. So yeah, maybe it's just the nature of his stories in a different way from somebody like Bendis, where his stuff just reads better in the trade. I don't know. All right, on to the last book we're going to talk about in detail. It's Poison Ivy number 14, written by G. Willow Wilson. Marcio Takara is the artist. Arif Prianto on colors. Hassan Atzman Elhal on letters. Okay, so here's where I'm going to go on my little bit of a mini rant here. I've been saving it up, I guess. This issue, more than any, really illustrated to me, again, the misstep of doing this summer event and pausing all the other books. I could not, for the life of me, remember what the hell happened in the last issue of Poison Ivy. I had to go and dig it out and find it and read it again. And then, oh, yeah, okay. So Poison Ivy went to the little shack in the swamp, ran into Killer Croc. Killer Croc mentioned that he couldn't live in the sewers underneath Gotham anymore because this corrupt corporation was, you know, building condominiums, and Pamela's like, oh, that's great. We need more housing, affordable housing. And Croc's like, no, it's not going to be affordable housing. It's for all these wealthy people to park their wealth in. And so then she went and she ended up finding a dead body, and that's where this one picks up. So I did not remember that at all, even though I read it, we covered it, we talked about it. So that's the kind of thing that is really frustrating when they do some big event and then I'm forced to go back and reread. It's hard enough with the amount of comics I read to remember 1 month to the next, let alone remembering 3 months back. So I don't know if you remembered, Rocky, or if you had to go back and look at it.
No, I did not. I did not remember that. No, you helped me. I just sort of
plowed through. Yeah.
I just plowed through it, and yeah.
I was like, I was like, why is she in this building walking around? Like, what the heck? And then for this issue itself, not much happens. Yeah, she walks around this building where she found this dead body, and gets the name of the corporation, calls Janet from HR, her sort of sidekick, I guess you'd say, her non-Harley sidekick, and gets her to go and do a job interview. All in the time she manages to call and set up a job interview in the time that Pamela is walking around this building. I was like, okay, we won't think about the timing of that. And then she eventually runs into this guy who has basically a big blue flower for a head. So how that's all going to play out, how it ties into the Lamia spores, I guess we'll wait and see. Meanwhile, we get a couple of interactions between Janet and Harley. Janet doesn't get the job with Undyne Industries is the name of the corporation, but she does kind of learn enough to see that things are suspicious there. And we also get Batman confronting Janet from HR saying, what are you doing hanging around with Pamela Isley? She's a terrorist. Go and save yourself. So everything in this issue happens in basically the course of an afternoon, which doesn't always seem like it's necessarily that realistic, but not that much happens. It's sort of a setup issue, if you will, with getting some perspective on the relationship. I guess it's a three. I don't want to use the word three-way because that
I will.
Yeah, I know you will. But that implies some sort of sexual whatever. But Harley and Janet do kiss, so maybe it is heading in that direction, menage a trois, if you will. But yeah, this triangle, this three-person relationship dynamic between Harley and Pamela and Janet and Poison Ivy, which keep in mind that Poison Ivy and Janet did sleep together when they were high on whatever was in that drink at the wellness seminar that they went to. And Harley doesn't know that yet. So how that might play out, what drama that might engender, I guess we'll wait and see. But then if Harley and Janet end up sleeping together, then isn't it just sort of quid pro quo?
Oh, you hit the mute button, I think.
Oops, sorry about that. Yeah, a little bit of a quid pro quo if Harley and Janet end up sleeping together. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. So yeah, a little bit of a setup issue, focusing a little bit on relationship stuff. And yeah, introduction of Blue Flower Face Man, I guess, whoever that is. We'll have to see. What'd you think of it?
I'm actually really curious of who this the blue flower face man is. It's actually the cover is fantastic. I really love cover A. For once, cover A I think is actually the best because this blue flower face man is this mysterious person at the end who may or may not be responsible for killing, for I don't know, for killing the person in the building. I'm not really sure what's going on. We know that, thanks to your wonderful summary there, Poison Ivy is investigating this, I guess, corporate takeover of some company buying off a bunch of properties in Gotham and maybe, I don't know, somehow, pissing off Poison Ivy because she wants to use them for herself, or they might be harming the environment. I'm not sure. Janet from HR standing up to Batman, panicking when, she slaps Batman when Batman tries to warn her to stay away from Poison Ivy, which you would expect Batman to do. And then Janet, I mean, she basically makes a pass at Harley. Harley didn't hit, Janet from HR just made a pass at Harley, and I don't think she's under the influence of any pheromone. Like she was. I mean, you could explain maybe Poison Ivy and Janet getting together because of because of the drugs or the mist or whatever it was, the pheromones in the air at the wellness retreat. But Janet throwing herself at Harley like that, I don't know. Maybe she's just one of those free people. She likes to spread her joy, and it's interesting. I'm really curious as to where it's going because. I'm curious what J. Willow Wilson I'm guessing that she thinks that Harley and Poison Ivy are very open and that they have an understanding that they can kind of be with whoever they like. Is that that's the strong implication here? I'm just kind of curious as to what J. Willow Wilson, what she's thinking, or if Janet has some sort of agenda here, or if she wants to play one off against the other. I'm actually kind of curious, and as a Purian fanboy, I'm all for the three-way. By all means, bring it on. But I am actually curious as to what, character-wise, I would have, for some reason, I wouldn't think that Harley wants to share Poison Ivy, and vice versa, quite frankly. But maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe maybe those Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn, they're very different things to different people. So. Who knows what direction they're going to go? Because between the Harley Quinn comic, Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy, between the cartoon, we got very different iterations. And between Harley on the Suicide Squad but in any event, interesting issue, and we'll see where it leads.
Yeah, I mean, there is something magnetic about Harley apparently when you're with her, and so yeah, Janet saying, "I never, saw what Pam sees in you, and now I see it," and then plants one on her. So. Yeah, I guess.
Well,
we'll see.
Let's put it this way. I mean, just imagine. I mean, I hope that Harley does have that magnetic personality because I can't wait for Big Barda to make a pass at her, and Black Canary, and Zealot, and Cassandra Cain. That Birds of Prey series is going to be very, very interesting moving forward.
Yeah, I know Harley's often portrayed as very attractive at times. I have never found her to be attractive. No, not the old version of her in her old classic Harley Quinn costume, or her new version. I don't know. Maybe it's her zany personality that's always been a turnoff, or the white skin. I don't know. I've never found her to be attractive. I don't know why that is. Maybe that's just me. Anyway, that does it for the single issues that we're going to discuss. I think that's all the single issues. Yeah, we covered everything other than there is a Blue Beetle Spanish version of that first issue. But as far as collections go, there's quite a few of them out this week. Nightwing Fear State trade paperback, which I I had forgotten. I had blocked out, I think, the Batman Fear State event with I can't even remember. It had Scarecrow in it, and then it had the whatever the
Oh,
fascist police state.
the magistrate.
Yeah, the magistrate.
Magistrate.
Yeah, tied in with future
And
state. All this stuff's
Peacemaker
better
one.
left.
Yeah.
Yeah, better left forgotten in my mind. But anyway, if you're curious, this is within the Tom Taylor run, but not really tied in with his run, with what he's actually trying to do. And the artist is different as well. It's Robbie Rodriguez. But anyway, it collects Nightwing 84, 85, and 86, and Nightwing 2021 annual #1, and then Nightwing Batman feature story from Batman Urban Legends #10. We've got a Batman Under the Red Hood Deluxe Edition hardcover. So this is basically Jason Todd coming back. So this collects Batman 635 through 641, Batman 645 through 650, Batman Annual 25, Red Hood The Lost Days 1 through 6, and selected pages from Batman 617 and 618. We've got a hardcover collection of Deceased, War of the Undead Gods, which concludes the Undead Gods story from Tom Taylor, with art by Trevor Hairsine, and then a Superman Kal-El Returns trade paperback, which collects Superman Son of Kal-El 16 through 18, Action Comics 1047 to 1049, and Superman Kal-El Returns Special 1. So this is basically after the War World Revolution. So Mark Waid, Tom Taylor, Philip Kenny Johnson, all teaming up to tell this story of after Superman comes back from that gladiatorial war world. Also, the Batman Adventures Omnibus hardcover. This is collecting the Batman Adventures, which is based on the cartoon. So this would contain that issue 12 that's very expensive with the first comic book appearance of Harley Quinn. It actually collects the entire Batman Adventures run, numbers 1 through 36, Batman Adventures Annual 1 and 2, Batman Adventures Holiday Special 1, a story from Batman Black and White #1, and the Batman Adventures Mad Love #1, which is the first and the first time never before reprinted comic adaptation of the animated feature film Batman Mask of the Phantasm.
Oh, nice.
Batman Justice Buster Volume 1, which collects... actually, what does this collect? It doesn't say. Written by Alicia Shimuza. So I imagine this is a manga version of Batman, based on the Asian characters, Batman Justice Buster, and the cover with manga-style art. Yeah, this looks like an English version of a manga Batman story. Joker 1 Operation trade paperback, which is written. This is also a manga adaptation written by Satoshi Miyagawa. And then finally, Superman 78, Batman 89 hardcover box set. So that collects the Robert Venditti Superman 78 series, as well as the Sam Hamm Batman 89, which was basically if Tim Burton had done a third Batman movie, and it would have starred Billy D. Williams as Two-Face, and that's the story we got in Batman 89. So those are the collections that are out this week. I guess it's time for picks, Rocky. What do you have for book of the week?
Well, you want to go first? I can go first if you like.
Yeah, it was pretty easy for me, actually.
Okay.
As much as I enjoyed a lot of the books this week, including Peacemaker and Justice Society, as well as the new Blue Beetle series that kicked off, I got to go with Birds of Prey. What Kelly Thompson did on that last page, with just giving us again a very well done recruitment issue, very high quality with good art.
Yeah.
But I just would have said, kind of your standard recruitment issue in terms of storytelling and structure. But then for her to just throw those couple of bombshells of a future version of Maps Mizuguchi, this Meridian character, and then the fact that Sin is being held prisoner by the Themyscirians. Yeah, that was just like, that is the way you set up a last page to ensure that your readers are going to show up for issue #2. So it's maybe one of those rare occurrences where second issue outsells the first. I don't know. They do a lot of covers, and there are a lot of covers for Birds of Prey #1, including a fantastic Art Germ Big Barda cover that I ordered. But yeah, I got to go with Birds of Prey. Kelly Thompson, man, she just continues through no fault of her own to be like one of my favorite writers, right? Not that I would fault her for doing that, but she's been my writer of the year before, and she does it in a way. I mean, I don't think a lot of people talk about her. She doesn't get a lot of press the way somebody like a Jeff Johns or a Tom King or a Scott Snyder. But everything she does just manages to really, really hit the spot for me. Like, and it's just like such a high quality caliber of work that she turns in like time after time, no matter what property is, whether it's over at Marvel, whether it's at DC, whether it's independent. Like, she's just a really talented storyteller. I don't think she gets enough credit for how good she is as a writer. Hopefully, with her coming across the street, having done Eisner-winning stuff, right? She won an Eisner for her Black Widow series over at Marvel. Now she comes over to DC. Hopefully, she can get some credit, and people can say, "Oh, she's not just great at writing Marvel, Black Widow or Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers' version of Captain Marvel, or X-Men or what have you. Now she's come over to DC and does fantastic stuff." Like, I'd love to see her take on one of the big books. Give me Kelly Thompson on Superman or Batman, and let's see. Let's get this woman a little bit more recognition, because I think she deserves it. So,
yeah.
Anyway, what are your thoughts on?
Well, my first choice is Birds of Prey. But it was. But I'll pick another one only because I was very impressed with it. But I want to say something quick about Kelly Thompson. She did something that I didn't think was possible. She actually made me forgive Carol Danvers. She actually made Carol Danvers likable again for me, because I didn't like Carol Danvers out of Civil War II for Marvel. And it was, I had a hate on for Carol Danvers for the longest time, but I started reading Captain Marvel, and lo and behold, all of her issues on Captain Marvel. It was one of the last Marvel titles that I collected until I stopped reading Marvel entirely. But it was Kelly Thompson and Sardasky on Daredevil those are the two holdouts, and now they're both gone. But in any event, so yeah, kudos, Birds of Prey. But I think Blue Beetle is worth a mention. Josh Torello I think did a really good job here. I think this is a sleeper. I think this is a sleeper issue, a sleeper hit. I think this is. I mean, I know no one cares about Ted Kord, but I think this was a really good issue, and the art was really excellent, and definitely worth a look-see between, and both opening issues, and both accessible to new readers. So if DC continues to, I think, get people, if they continue to pump out titles like this, they're going to get people interested. Birds of Prey, Blue Beetle, definitely both worth checking out.
Yeah. So leave some comments, everybody, in the comments below. If you're checking us out on YouTube, give us your thoughts on who's right. Is Selena right? Is Batman right? Are they both right? Are they both wrong? Yeah, Rocky and I had a very heated debate before we started recording. Yeah, definitely different perspectives, and interesting that Zdarsky and Howard are giving us something to think about. So don't forget to check us out on YouTube. As I mentioned, Rocky's channel, Comic Space Boom ! Leave comments like I mentioned. Ring the notification bell, subscribe, so you know when new content comes out. We really appreciate that. Conversely, if you're checking us out on YouTube and you want to listen to the other audio-only content from the Comic Source, just go to wherever you get your podcast, do a search for the Comic Source, and subscribe. Have a great episode that came out this week with writer Kenny Porter, who's doing the Superman, or Superboy rather, Man of Tomorrow series, as well as the Schlub. He actually came on to talk about Spawn. He's in the midst of a giant Spawn reread. I'm trying to get the Daily Spawn podcast started back up. I know Kenny was doing a reread. So he previously has read the first 100 issues, but hasn't read basically 101 to 300, but then picked it back up with 300. So now he's just now getting into stuff that he's never read before. So we had a great conversation about Spawn. And of course, I couldn't have him on without talking about Schlub and Superboy, so we touched on those things as well. So go and check it out. It was a great conversation. As I mentioned, be sure you subscribe to both Comic Boom and the Comic Source. We appreciate the support as always, and we will talk to you next time.
Catch you later.